We're going to talk about a very important and interesting topic of hypergonadotropic hypogonadism in females. And we all know that in comparison with boys, we have got more likelihood of having hypergonadotropic hypogonadism in girls. And most of these cases turn out to be Turner syndrome. But today what we'll do is that we'll talk about 4 interesting cases who turn out to be non-Turner, who have presented with hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, and all of them were congenital. So we're talking about very early onset hypogonadism because of a probable ovarian etiology beyond Turner. And this is an important area to look at in girls presenting to us with delayed puberty, with primary amenorrhea, and how do we evaluate and access from there is what we're going to discuss. So I'll start off with this flag case of a 17-year-old girl with primary amenorrhea who presented with stage 4 development and stage 4 pubic hair development. And she was tall. When we inquired, the major complaint was primary amenorrhea, but she had visited the doctors with complaints of absent pubertal development and had received estrogen therapy. And when we did a workup, we found that the karyotype was high. Now, at this point of time, what do you think? There are no features of Turner syndrome. There is no short stature. Do we need to do anything else from here, Sayan? We already know that this is a case of hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. Gonadotrophins are high. Turner's is unlikely given the code. There are no clinical features. She's tall and short stature is the most common manifestation. The further workup, would you like to do anything else, or will you try to start estrogen?
As you mentioned, the tall stature. Would like to do a cardiograph.
Why?
So because XY gonadal dysgenesis.
So this is an important message. So what is important to understand is that any individual who comes to you with hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, it is absolutely mandatory to do a karyotype, because it's not just Turner syndrome that you're looking at. This girl turned out to be a XY individual and turned out to be, and we'll discuss such cases subsequently, a particular situation of SRY defect in which gonadectomy was required in that perspective. So it's very important to understand that hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, we have to do a karyotype. And only when the karyotype is normal, you start thinking of other possibilities. And you can always think that XY-DSD may be a cause of hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. Now we know that XY-DSD is an act of omission. Now, any act of omission, be it gonadal formation, testosterone biosynthesis, conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, or androgen receptivity, any of these defects will present like a normal female appearance with primary amenorrhea. So that's why XY-DSD is an important differential which happened in this case. We'll discuss about this and other cases as well in that regards. So if we talk about delayed puberty overall, we know that compared to boys, the chances of having physiological causes is less in girls, but still it is 30 to 40%. There is also a higher likelihood of having a hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, and therefore you will have more of what we are discussing today. In boys, the numbers is usually less, but in girls, it's much more important from that perspective. Now, you can all have a look at our different courses which are available on our website. We do perform twice a month grand rounds related to both postgraduates as well as more for the fellows. There are also books which are available in our website and the application which we'll try to use and the fellowship which has recently been launched. So what we'll do today is that we'll talk about 4 interesting cases, all of them presented with primary amenorrhea, and all of them had no breast development. So this is more like a congenital form of hypogonadism. All of them had a sky-high FSH. So this is hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, and they had a normal karyotype. So these are these 3 cases, and that's why we'll discuss about these. So they had subtle clinical pointers which highlighted toward a particular diagnosis, which we'll discuss from that. So just to summarize as to what are the possible causes we are thinking about when we talk about congenital hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, we're talking about problems either in the ovarian development per se. So we're talking about gonadal dysgenesis. The classical example is Turner syndrome. But now we know that there are multiple genes which are regulating the development of the ovaries. So if they are defect in either, so it can either be a XX-DSD or a XY-DSD, which is manifesting as a female, there can be multiple problems. We'll discuss about that. Then there could be a steroidogenic defect right from the start in the axis of formation of estrogen, and they can be combined with the adrenal abnormalities in the form of star, side chain cleavage, and 17-hydroxylase, or they can be isolated like 17 beta HSD and aromatase, which we'll discuss subsequently, which can cause these problems. Now, an important thing to remember is that while gonadal dysgenesis is associated with global failure as far as ovarian function, steroidogenic defect will have a selective effect on these steroidogenic cells. But what will happen to their fertility potential, Naveen? If you have a complete estrogen deficiency, let's say in the setting of aromatase deficiency, in the setting of star defect, what will happen to their reproductive potential, or let's say how their oocytes will work?
No, sir, there will be a problem with this.
Why?
Because germ cells and both are actually essential for the.
So while the development of the germ cells and the estrogen producing cells, or let's say the granulosa cell and the Zika cells is separate, both are essential for their mutual development. If you have complete estrogen deficiency, now I'm talking about complete estrogen deficiency, there would be a luteinization of the follicle. So the follicle will actually die off early. This is very important. When we talk about complete, we mean nothing is being produced. So if you have zero estrogen, we have seen patients with aromatase, we have seen patients with 17 beta HSD, 17 hydroxylase who have got zero AMH, which is basically because their oocytes have died because they did not get any estrogen, which had a protective effect for the oocytes. That is important. Now, if you compare with somebody who has a hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, let's say Kalaman equivalent, you have got no LH, no FSH, why are they then having some potential of fertility? When you give them FSH or LH, they respond. Why don't their oocyte die? You're saying that estrogen is essential for their follicular growth, but in that setting of isolated HH, they still respond later on. Pratik, what do you think? So if you remember your physiology correctly, the initial production of estrogen or the initial follicular growth is FSH independent. Only once your follicle reaches around 4 to 5 mm, your FSH work starts to occur. So if you have zero estrogen producing capacity, which means even paracrine estrogen is not being produced, you don't have any production there, you will of course have a problem. But even if you don't have LH or FSH, some amount of androgen, some amount of estrogen will be locally produced, which will be enough to save those oocytes, which can then be used later on when you give them gonadotropin. So this is the difference between these. But remember, steroidogenic defects of severe form will also have, in a way, gonadal failure. So it's both mutual. Don't expect that one way or the other things will be affected. So AMH levels will be low in most of these conditions, and they are not discriminatory, so to speak, between a primary gonadal problem and a primary problem in the steroidogenic pathway. So now if we talk about congenital hyper-hypo, we can classify them as estrogen deficiency, which is pretty much the most common cause. And this deficiency can be because of gonadal dysgenesis. Now this dysgenesis could be XX as well as XY. So that's what we are saying, that many of these XY defects, if they are severe, they will present just like a normal phenotypic female with delayed puberty and primary amenorrhea. Now, if you look at gonadal dysgenesis in the XX part, the one on the left, most common is of course Turner syndrome. But you see, there are so many genes which are involved in ovarian development, and if you have a defect in any of them, you will also have a similar picture. They may not have phenotypic characteristics of Turner syndrome. So if you don't have phenotypic characteristics of Turner syndrome, start thinking of other possibilities. Very important things out of these are actually myotonia, and many of these neurological anomalies are also associated. The Fragile X-related anomalies are also reported more commonly. There are many of these genetic defects as well as autosomies which cause that. Now, if you look at XY DSD, again, any condition which causes complete testicular dysgenesis, you will have a similar picture. Now, Manoj, what is the difference clinically between a XX gonadogenesis and a XY gonadogenesis? Both are presenting with no breast, no pubic hair. What is the most important thing you like to look at? Yes. So if you have somebody who is tall, when you say tall, you're basically talking about a male height. That itself is 13 centimeters higher than a female height. Start thinking of a XY DSD, and that will be relevant in one of our cases, which I think you will discuss in that perspective. On the other hand, if somebody is really short, you are thinking of Shock's defect. So Shock's is gone. So that means it goes more like a XX gonadogenesis, mostly Turner's. Normal height, you're talking about many of the other disorders in which they will not be affected. So height is a very, very important pointer toward the diagnosis in congenital hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. Yeah. Now, the other way around is, of course, biosynthetic defect. And this can, of course, happen in because of pathways which can happen. And you can also have a problem in the gonadotropin resistance. This is rare in that perspective. Now, steroidogenic defect can start from a defect which is very proximal, star and side chain cleavage. Now, how would Dr. Vibha star and side chain cleavage deficiency present as? Adrenal insufficiency along with salt wasting, yeah, salt wasting and ovarian abnormality. So the star defect is unique that it has got the 2-hit model. We have been discussing that if you have the first hit, this steroidogenesis comes down to around 15-20%. But that is enough to avoid salt wasting. Now, once the cholesterol accumulates in the cell, it will cause damage and destruction of the cell, which is the second hit model. And you have a delayed adrenal insufficiency happening around 2 to 3 months of age. But when does the ovarian insufficiency happen? Do they have any breast development or not in star defect? Sign?
So they will have a breast development because the follicles are inactive during the prepubertal stage. So when puberty progresses, 17% activity will be there. So some form of breast development.
So there is a dichotomy in the presentation in boys. Testis is very active during fetal period. So testis is destroyed. So they will present with right in the fetal testosterone deficiency will happen. While ovaries, as far as the steroidogenesis is concerned, is quiescent. So ovaries are preserved. With every cycle, a new follicle comes up. So what will happen is that this follicle will go up to a particular stage. It will produce some amount of estrogen, which will cause some breast development, but it is not enough to cause periods or definitely in terms of ovulation in that perspective. So star defect will present with delayed salt wasting and delayed puberty plus minus mainly as primary amenorrhea. Now this is for the classical star. If you have a milder defect, the salt wasting may not be there. Then they will present more like a estrogen deficiency. They will have a typical presentation more like a PCOS like presentation. Large cyst can also develop because FSH is high. Large cyst will start appearing in that perspective. What about 3 beta HSD? How would 3 beta HSD deficiency present with Naveen?
Sir, they also can present with, they can start there.
So if we talk about classical 3 beta will present with?
So they usually present with salt wasting in the initial form of life
And
delayed puberty.
And DSD, because the androgen levels will be high. While the milder form will present absence of salt wasting, but will present with hyperandrogenism. So they are not the differential here. So I'm not considering 3 beta HSD as a differential here because they will present more with hyperandrogenic features like PCOS. That will be more likely in that perspective. How would 17 hydroxylase present, Manoj?
So 17 hydroxylase present with hypertension.
Yes. Why is the hypertension there?
Because there is increased cortical activity.
So what is happening is that your entire steroidogenic pathway is going towards the mineralocorticoid. It is not going towards the glucocorticoid. It's not going towards the androgens and estrogen, of course, because estrogen requires androgen to be formed. So 17 hydroxylase will basically present with hypertension, hypokalemic alkalosis, and delayed puberty. Now, very importantly, any girl with hypertension and sexual infantilism, whether they are gonads or not, think of 17 hydroxylase deficiency, because if it's a XY DSD, you may have inguinal gonads. If it's a XX DSD, gonads may be absent. The clue there would be hypertension, but we'll discuss how hypertension may be missed or it may not be very significant in the initial phase. So theoretically, we talk about everybody should become hypertensive, but sometimes it may be variable in that perspective. Dr. Pratik, how would 17 beta HSD present with?
Sir, in males, it will present as a DSD, underutilization, XY DSD. In females, sir, according to what studies have mentioned, they might present with underutilization as I will present, or they might completely be asymptomatic and infertile.
So if you have complete 17 beta HSD deficiency, you will basically present just like a absent, like a estrogen deficiency. XY, you will present like a normal looking female with inguinal gonads. So XY complete 17 beta HSD will present like a female who has gonads. XX will present with a female without gonads. If you have a partial activity, you will have partial development, which will of course be dependent upon different perspective. So we talked about star SCC 17 hydroxylase 17 beta HSD. What about aromatase sign? How will aromatase classical and non-classical present?
Classical has complete estrogen deficiency. So there will be a history of maternal fertilization and there will be a DSD at birth. But the size of that phallus will not increase. And then again, the child will present at the pubertal age with delayed puberty. Now, the non-classical aromatase deficiency may have mild estrogen production from the placenta, but not from the ovaries. So they'll only present with signs of delayed puberty.
So aromatase deficiency will present if in the classical form as DSD with maternal virilization, which is very clear. But you can also have a differential as far as the differential for PCOS. So as 3 beta HSD is differential, mild aromatase deficiency may cause hyperandrogenism during adolescence, because that's again the time when androgen production will increase. What will be the closest differential to aromatase deficiency? So aromatase deficiency presents with large cis, high FSH, low estrogen, high androgen. Which other steroidogenic defect which I have not mentioned here can also cause entirely the same picture? So can you think of it? POR. So oxidoreductase deficiency, because POR is essentially a cofactor. And if it is not working, aromatase will not work, because it's and 17 hydroxylase will not work. So that is the cofactor. So POR can be there. So these are the key steroidogenic defects that we'll discuss. And many of these will come up in the cases that will come up. That's why we are focusing more. Now, gonadotropin resistance can also cause a picture of quote unquote hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. What is the difference between the manifestations of LH receptor defects in boys and girls, Dr. Manoj?
So LH receptor defect in boys. So there is a delayed puberty in boys, but in case of the female, there is only ovulation.
And FSH receptor defect?
Means FSH receptor defect in girl may be present in the cause of delayed.
So the main thing to remember is that the predominant gonadotropin in boys is LH. The predominant gonadotropin in girls is FSH. I'm talking in a very simplistic fashion, but this is something very easy to understand. If your LH receptor is not working, in a boy, you will have no pubertal development. That will be like a primary delayed puberty, complete, congenital. While if LH is not working in female, you can still have normal development. The only thing which will not happen is ovulation may not happen. On the other hand, if the FSH is not working in a boy, you can still have puberty, but there will be infertility. While if FSH is not working in a girl, you will have complete congenital deficiency, which is there. What about the third situation which I am writing, pseudo-hypoparathyroidism? How does it present?
So it presents mainly the short stature round pieces, PHO phenotypes, and
About puberty.
There is a pseudo-hypoparathyroidism.
No, about puberty. But that is of course pseudo-hypoparathyroidism.
Because they decrease the GNS.
What will be the FSH level in that setting? Not very high. So they are not as high as Turner's. They will be like 20, 30. In Turner's, we'll see much higher levels. Then we'll talk about how all these patients have very sky high level. So this will become important. And then we have got a final differential, which is estrogen receptor defect. How would estrogen receptor defect present with Dr. Vibha? What will be the height of these patients, estrogen receptor defect? Short or tall? And their bones will not fuse because they have estrogen is essential for epiphyseal fusion. So they will have long bones, but weak bones. That will be the presentation. They will have no breast development. And this is the classical, but this is very, very rare. So what we're going to focus today, we've got 4 cases. Few of them are steroidogenic defect. There are one which is XX and one which is a XY DSD. So we've got these 3 boxes covered, and these are the most common things that we'll discuss today in more detail. Now, when should we consider a impaired estrogen effect? Of course, if there are features of delayed puberty, no thelarchy by 13 years, no menarche within 3 years, of thelarchy or secondary amenorrhea, which is defined as 90 days if you have regular cycle and 6 months if there are irregular cycles. And sometimes, rarely, although when I talk about congenital, this is out, they will present more with oligomenorrhea. And that would be age and post-menarchal related timing as far as the number of periods is concerned. So less than 4 period in the first year, less than 6 between 2 to 4, and less than 8 after 5th year will consider as oligomenorrhea. So oligomenorrhea, amenorrhea, primary amenorrhea, secondary amenorrhea, and delayed puberty. This will be a whole spectrum of presentation. Congenital, of course, will present mostly with no breast development in that regards. And of course, the FSH will be high. And what's high? What FSH do you consider high?
In the clinical context, more than 10, we can say, more specific.
Yeah, so when you want to distinguish between hyper versus hypo, I think 10 may be a reasonable number to go, but usually the numbers are very high when we talk about Turner's and other aspects in that situation. Now, other things to look at is, of course, the weight. If somebody is obese, think of Turner's and PHP. Somebody has got polydactyly, think of Lawrence-Moon-Beetle syndrome. If there is deafness, think of Turner's and pseudohypoparathyroidism. If there is brachymetacarpia, again Turner's and pseudohypoparathyroidism. If the height is less, so we talked about short stature, it is a Shock's defect. If height is more, we are talking about XY DSD. If height is normal, we are talking about probably some form of a normal XX DSD. And we have got all three range, which we'll discuss soon on that regards. And of course, if there is hypertension, think of 17-hydroxylase deficiency, but also Turner syndrome would be the most common cause in that setting. Very important, and this is what we have been talking a lot about, that always look at pubic hairs. When you're looking at a child with delayed puberty, look at pubic hair, because pubic hairs are coming from a normal adrenal origin. So if you have got breast development with pubic hair, what does it mean? It means that there is no problem in maturity of the child. The child is having a normal maturity. So CDGP is out. There is a discrepancy between the gonadarchy and the adrenarchy. And therefore, this goes most likely in favor of GnRH deficiency. Turner syndrome, also you can have pubarchy, but it will be slightly less compared to normal because bone age may be slightly, the maturity may be slightly low. Let's put it this way. If, on the other hand, if you have no breast development and you have got no pubic hair development, the most likely possibility will be constitutional delay of puberty and growth. Second would be a systemic illness. Because of systemic illness, you are not having enough adrenarchy or gonadarchy. Third possibility would be if you have a multiple pituitary hormone deficiency and ACTH is also less. So these three will all have one thing in common: short stature. So short stature with no pubarchy, no thelarchy, think of CDGP, MPHD, and third would be a systemic illness. But if you have a tall child who has this phenotype, what would you think of, Naveen?
The tall child, you can think of estrogen action different, you can think of steroid different.
Yeah, so there is a problem of either estrogen synthesis or action. That will be the most likely thing. So mostly clinically, if you talk about CDGP, illness will be the most likely, but MPHD plus estrogen defect can be the most important cause to think of. If you have normal breast development, no pubic hair development, and no menarche, Dr. Vibha, diagnosis? Good breast development, sparse pubic hair, primary amenorrhea. This is delayed puberty. Manoj? 5-alpha reductive. Anything else? Androgen insensitivity syndrome. You've got no pubic hair development. 5-alpha reductase, don't you virilize? You have seen the patient who virilized during puberty. So this is classical AIS. There is no confusion on that. If you have normal breast development, normal pubic hair development, amenorrhea, diagnosis, local cause, so Mullerian agenesis. Plus, you can think of hirsutism. If somebody has got hirsutism, think of PCOS presenting as primary amenorrhea. So the most important thing to look at in a girl with delayed puberty, and we'll use this a lot in this grand round, is pubic hair and height. These two will give you a lot of factors in that regard. This is what we're going to try to build up in that situation. This is the simplistic algorithm which we've discussed earlier also. Do screening tests, CBC, SGPT, creatinine, TSH, TTG. Once you've excluded that, if gonadotropins is low, think of a hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, think of MRI. But we are interested here. If your FSH is high, and we have talked about FSH of 10, there is no clear-cut cutoff at what level you should consider to be high, but I would say if it's more than 10, at least get a karyotype done. If karyotype shows XO or mosaic, it is Turner's. I think that's the end of the story. That's a different ball game altogether. We're not going to discuss that. If it is XX, now what do you do here is a debate. Whether you do a targeted genetic panel in everybody, because 10 to 20% of what we know as premature ovarian insufficiency may have some of those genetic defects. We'll show one case how doing NGS could help you pick up a diagnosis, but whether it's required everybody becomes difficult. Steroid metabolites are expensive. It may not really change your management. So it depends upon how much the patient can afford. And if you have hypertension, hypokalemia, then you definitely it is required. Otherwise it is plus minus. Calcium phosphorus alkaline phosphatase and the antibodies, again, more likely to be because of PHP or autoimmune association. Again, not very common, but depending on the clinical picture, you can do it like a baseline workup. If it's XY, then again, doing a genetic workup will help you, because then you have to decide about gonadectomy. A lot of other issues are also important. And then probably testosterone and...
Case of 25-year-old female who presented with us with the main complaint of the infertility and primary amenorrhea. A patient is born of non-consecutive marriage, and a patient having no spontaneous breast development after estrogen replacement, and there is a diagnosis by the gynecologist is primary amenorrhea.
So she had bleeding also after this thing?
No, sir.
So she was given some
Primary
estrogen, which caused breast development, and then there was amenorrhea.
So if we continue the case, there is no history of any chronic illness, no history of ear and eye abnormality or syndromic features. There is no any history suggestive of the hypogonadism. Hypogonadism. There is no any stigmata of Turner. There is no any history of chronic illness, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or space occupying lesion. No hypertension, no history of pubertal virilization, no significant family history, and there is no history of maternal virilization. So from this history, I can summarize the case: 25-year-old female with the primary amenorrhea, there is no history suggestive of chronic illness, or there is no history of any chronic illness, or there is no any history of acquired illness. So by the examination, patient height is 168 centimeter, taller than mother and father. Weight is 66 kilogram. Patient having normal genitalia, no palpable gonads, no clitoromegaly, and no history of virilization. Important finding we found here that breast stage after the estrogen replacement was 5, and there is pubic hair is normal.
So what it is telling us, there are two important things that you are seeing. One, you are seeing that this girl is tall, much taller than the family members, and she was much taller than the husband also when we saw that. The other thing is that there is pubic hair development. So what does it mean? So she is different from all the other 3 cases. So what are their differential?
Sir, pubic hair
is of course discrepant because your breast development was after estrogen.
Sir, pubic hair normal, so we can rule out the combined ovarian and adrenal etiology. And height is normal, so we can rule out that we can rule out Turner and other defects.
So this looks like a isolated ovarian problem rather than a ovo-adrenal problem. And with tall stature, again, think about a possibility of a XY will become important. AIS, you thinking of the possibility?
So most of the babies for breast development,
and the pubic hair will be absent. So that will be issue. Okay.
So if there is a normal height and there is pubic hair development, so we can keep the 2 broad category in mind: hypogonadotropic hypogonadism or hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, because pubic hair is normal. So after the investigation, FSH is high, 50, and LH is 21. Estrogen is very low, that is 5 picogram per ml, and USG abdomen is suggestive of Mullerian structure is normal. So we are dealing with the hypergonadotropic hypogonadism in
Now,
this
if
case.
we talk about hypergonadotropic hypogonadism with tall stage, with normal pubic hair, what are you looking at?
Sir, we are dealing with mainly XY because of the gonadal dysgenesis might be possible.
So tall stature is a big pointer. If somebody is really tall, then gonadal agenesis, especially XY, becomes important in that regard. As we've discussed earlier, it is unlikely that you will have a situation like in the setting of having androgen sensitivity is unlikely. And local malformations also are out. This is more like a ovarian failure in which you have got a problem which is associated with other factors with tall stature. So this is important. Carrying forward.
So, as sir discussed, we have case of the primary ovarian insufficiency mainly due to the genetic defect. Second, might be due to the gonadal dysgenesis, or third, we can keep possibility of steroidogenic defect, but it is less likely because of the normal pubic hair, no NICU history of admission, and no salt wasting. So, as according to protocol, we did the karyotype. It is suggestive of XY. So, if I summarize this patient having 25-year-old female with the primary amenorrhea, breast development after the estrogen therapy with normal pubic hair, with normal height, and patient having XY karyotype.
So what do you think of the possibility now, Sayan?
So what is the karyotype?
Karyotype shows XY.
So XY gonadal dysgenesis.
What cause?
XY gonadal SRY deletion.
So you have to then start thinking of the various defects. So SRY would be the most common, but you can also have WT1, NR5A1, anyone, and this is complete. Because that's why you wrote them any development. But adrenal is preserved, that's why you had the pubic hair development.
So we did testosterone after the SCG stimulation, it is low. So it is suggestive of no, there is no functional testis present. So if
And what is the other indicator that there is no functional testis present? I mean, in this case.
uterus
Uterus is present, so which would basically mean that there is no AMH. So that means there is no AMH and no testis.
If we go by our diagnostic approach by the XY-DSD, if there is palpable gonad, there is no palpable gonad. So Mullerian structure is present or not? So there is presence of Mullerian structure. So our diagnosis is gonadal dysgenesis in this case. So we did NGS. It is suggest there is SRY negative in this case. So our diagnosis in this case, a patient having XY-DSD with SRY deletion.
Yeah.
As we know, the SRY gene having the role with the NR5-1 with the testicular development. In the absence of the SRY gene, there is a development of the ovary. There is development of the ovary. When we have to suspect the SRY gene, if the patient having delayed puberty with a normal female, in absence of the any Turner stigmata, with a Mullerian structure is present, if patient having normal or high height with a normal adrenal axis and with XY karyotype, we can think about the SRY, because SRY can cause 10 to 20% cause of the delayed puberty. So there is a variety of spectrum. It could be due to the complete deletion, or it could be due to the partial deletion. Complete deletion may present with the normal female with the gonadal dysgenesis, and partial deletion present with the female with the ovotesticular DSD. In the case, because of the because of the SRY deletion, there is no other gene also for the fertility. So fertility is always an issue. The treatment is mainly estrogen and progesterone replacement, and prophylactically gonadectomy in ovotesticular or SRY deletion, because there is chances of the 10 to 20% chances of the malignancy.
So in this case, would you advise gonadectomy or not?
So in this case, there is after the SCG stimulation test, there is no any functional testicular tissue.
But what about Turner syndrome?
So in Turner we don't. If it is history of
Turner
virilization
with Y9, will you do a gonadectomy?
yes, sir, we have to do, because
she will behave like this only. Na? So you don't do a SCG test in Turners to see whether they are responding or not. So this theoretically will behave the same manner, like a Turner syndrome with basically there is a XY individual who has presented more like a gonadogenesis. Now, what we're trying to say that there is a complete damage to the testis. It can't even develop into a malignancy. But theoretically, it may still be better to remove the gonads in this setting also, because you don't want to take a risk unnecessarily in that perspective.
So according to case report, they found there is a fibroadipose tissue while the laparoscopy.
So that is fine, but how do you know in your case also it will be fibroadipose? Just you can't just go on to one single case report as to what they have reported.
Okay.
So as a clinician, we actually recommended gonadectomy in this case, and then they were lost to follow up because their main concern was fertility. They were not concerned about all these factors. But this is a very, very interesting situation to talk about. So what Manoj has presented is a completely different case from the other cases. So when we saw the other case, the first case, we had got a tallish girl, not really tall, with no breast, no pubic hair development, and there was 0 levels of estrogen and testosterone. So that is more like 17 beta HST. The second case was again a tallish girl who had normal blood pressure to begin with, no breast, no pubic hair, then persistent hypertension. That's like 17 hydroxylase. Science case was different. There was short stature, again no breast, no pubic hair development, and then we thought of a ovarian problem because pubic hair developed on follow-up on treatment and there was a family history. Now this is entirely different. You have got pubic hair and you have got tall stature. This is not short, not tallish, tall stature. So again, tall stature is a very important thing. Somebody who is tall with delayed puberty, most likely it is a XY individual who is presenting with delayed puberty in that setting. That becomes important. And in this setting, XY, first thing would be SRY. That is the most common cause in that setting. And this is like a complete gonadalogenesis, or what you're talking about as a Swyer syndrome in that regards. Now, some people may say that if your gonad is totally gone, then what is the point in removing that? But it will be a risky situation. There is no guideline sort of a thing in this setting. Better to remove it in that setting would be the way forward if you want to in that regards. So XY gonadogenesis can happen in multiple factors. The most common cause is SRY. Now, if your SRY is not there, you will not have a testicular development. But that does not mean that this will develop into an ovary, because there are so many other factors, SOX9 expression, whether the DAX1, FOXL2, how they are working or not. So this will have a dysgenetic gonad, but you will not develop into an ovary. So that is why you don't have an ovarian development in that setting. Now, there could be a problem in NR5A1, adrenal, WT1, Denish-Dras. Again, the whole XY-DSD, which we discussed earlier, will have association, a SOX9 problem, which will be associated with dysplasia. And these parameters could also be there, like DAX1 duplication. So, but this case clearly was a SRY deletion, which we identified. So the key message is, tall girl who has a primary amenorrhea, start thinking of a DSD. It may not just be a simple case of a pubertal issue. It's more likely to be a DSD in that perspective. Now, this girl did not have a uterus. And I think that's an important pointer. Did have a uterus. That's an important pointer. The testis was completely gone. So there was no AMH production also, which happened in this case. 10-year-old girl with delayed puberty, no breast, no pubic hair, height is short. Now, workup was done. FSH is 21. What do you think, Sayan, with this sort of a report?
So this is a short, it's a Turner syndrome.
What about the FSH report? Is it high?
It is mildly high. So we consider.
So you have to consider other possibilities. So Turner's is of course a possibility, but this is not that high because all your reports was 75, 100, 90. What about your case?
51.
So it was high. So it's like 21. Think of other possibilities as well. So karyotype was normal. So the possibility then was that this child had a brachymetacarpia, and this turned out to be a case of pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. This is rare. I have seen a couple of cases also, but this is an important differential to consider. You can make a diagnosis clinically. 15-year-old girl with primary amenorrhea, Dr. Naveen, no breast, no pubic hair, height is 152, weight is 52. Now, what will you do? Gonadotrophin levels 67. So
now we have a height is somewhat slightly in the normal range. So
karyotype, anyway, you will do. So karyotype, there was mild hirsutism, there was large ovarian cyst, and there was a XX karyotype. What are you thinking of?
yeah, and so LH is a
LH receptor defect, you won't have large cyst. Aromatase deficiency. Aromatase or POR will be the possibility. So you have got a girl who is not very tall, normal sort of a height, very high FSH. You excluded Turner syndrome, large ovarian cyst. Again, aromatase POR will be the most likely possibility, which was found, and there was a history of maternal virilization and aromatase deficiency. So we have tried to look at the different forms of spectrum of congenital hypogonadotropic hypogonadism beyond Turner syndrome, and we have focused on that. All of you can go and have a look at, we'll load up this presentation also on YouTube as well as our website as well. You can explore our courses also, which are available for fellowship and diploma courses, our book and the mobile application. We'll now take up a few questions which are there before closing. So I think there is a question which is there from Dr. Elizabeth. The second patient had an absent uterus, but with HRT achieved menarche. Now, this is something which we wanted to give as a big message also. So this patient actually did not have an absent uterus. The radiologist had reported it as an absent uterus. And this is a common situation because if there is no breast development, the uterus is paper thin. And often a transabdominal ultrasound may miss it. So somebody who is not sensitive enough may report it as an absent uterus. So this is not absent uterus. If there is no breast development, do not get an ultrasound done because again, this will give you a false diagnosis. This is one of the many cases that we have seen who have been referred as quote unquote absent uterus, and this is a normal uterus which is there. So I think this was a good point which Dr. Elizabeth has brought out. Again, interesting, but it is a practical issue in that regards. Now there are questions also from Dr. Rashi. If you do androstenedione levels in case 1, will it confirm 17 beta HSG? Absolutely. So I would say the most important investigation in that case will be androstenedione, and that's we'll try to get it done and we'll update once that's available. Dr. Vidya is asking what are the karyotype in case 1. So karyotype, yeah. So she, again, this is a very recent case which we have just seen, I think last week or so. She is being advised to karyotype another workup. It's not available yet, but we'll see the cost issues were there. Dr. Pragati, for treatment, how long to give estrogen only and when to add progesterone? So I think this is something which we discuss in detail in our pubertal induction. Just to summarize, we'll start off from around 10% to 15% of the usual dose. So it's something like 0.25 milligram of Proginova, or if you're using the patch, you're talking about very small doses of patch. Build it up gradually till around 2 years, maybe around 25% every 6 months increase to build up around 2 milligrams of Proginova by around 2 years. And then if there is a spontaneous bleeding or if the ET is more than 5 mm, you can add progesterone from that perspective. While sending NGS, would we mention targeted panel? Yes, targeted panel is always better, Dr. Nitin, because if you do a targeted panel, you will get a specific, the range and the reading depth or the number of time that particular site is checked will be more. So targeted panel will be less expensive, and that will be a better thing for ovarian targeted panel. What we are finding is that compared to many of these biochemical tests, which are also very expensive, may not be giving you the right diagnosis because there can be some other genetic cause. Targeted panels are much better because they give you a precise diagnosis in that perspective.